Hello, y'all. It's not Christopher. If you're a regular attendee of Web Wednesdays, you may notice that there's a different human here today, and that is me, Chloe Condon, subbing in. This is a very special episode. We are doing, so originally when Christopher and I scheduled this, we wanted to continue our conversation from my first Web Wednesday chat that we had, where we talked all about coming into tech from a non-traditional background. And we ended up going on this really fun tangent about the importance of public speaking and how different things, from our backgrounds came into play quite a bit. And when he asked me to take over the stream and said, do you know anyone who'd be good to chat to about like coming into this industry from a non-traditional path? I was like, Christopher, I have the best people to talk to. So today we are going to be talking all about how to break into tech from two lovely individuals that I actually met through the Microsoft Reactor, ironically enough, if you're tuning in currently from our Reactor YouTube. So I think we should just get right into it here. I'm going to welcome two fabulous gals who I met at the Reactor many years ago. Welcome to the show, Kimberly and Sophia. Hello.
Hello. So good to see you.
I'm so excited. This, honestly, y'all, you're seeing a reunion live on camera right now because these are two lovely humans that I literally watched go from their pre-engineering lives being like, I don't know, can I do this? Is this for me? To now working full-time in developer roles. I could not be prouder. But before we get any further, I thought we would start out with some intros. So, Kimberly, do you want to start out and let the lovely humans at home know a little bit about yourself and what you do now? We're going to get into your Marvel origin story throughout this whole stream, but tell the folks who you are and what you do.
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. I'm Kimberly. I'm a developer relations engineer at Daily. Daily builds real-time audio and video APIs that developers can use to add calls to their websites and applications.
So exciting. And also I should mention, any questions that anybody has in the chat for me, for Kimberly, for Sophia, put them in the chat. We're going to answer them live. Sophia, let the lovely folks know what you do.
Hello everyone. My name is Sophia. I am currently a software engineer at Free Will, and Free Will helps people make wills easy and accessible.
That's amazing, and such an important tool to be working on, just making those kind of tools accessible to people. So I'm like, thank you for doing the work that you do. I figured a really fun way to start out the stream. Oh, I should also say who I am. I'm not Christopher, obviously. I am the understudy for Christopher today. I'm Chloe Condon. I also come from a non-traditional background, which is, I think, is why myself and these lovely humans ended up connecting. We definitely bonded over a self-taught boot camp, non-traditional type path into tech. I am an actress turned engineer. Used to do musicals and admin work and recruiting. Oh my gosh, executive assistant work, office management. You can watch the previous episode of Web Wednesday I was on to get that whole origin story. I don't want to talk too much about myself on this stream, but I thought we would all kind of start from the beginning of what were y'all doing before we all magically, hello folks in the chat. Hi jQuery, so lovely to see you in the chat. So Sophia, what was your life like leading up to / when we met at the Reactor many moons ago? And correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you attended a boot camp office hours? Is that where we met?
Yes, we met at the Microsoft Bootcamp office hours, and that's how our bread project all kicked off.
That is true, and such a great segue into what you were doing before, because this is why I became so obsessed with Sophia, and I was like, we're working on something together. So what was your life pre-eng?
Yeah, excellent question. Pre-eng, I was working as a baker in San Francisco, baking sourdough bread.
Okay, and if people don't know, sourdough bread is like the San Francisco treat. It's not rice-a-roni. And there's like a whole like science and art to sourdough, correct?
Yes, I can go on about it forever, but it's basically just you feed a little thing called starter and you can make bread with it. It is very cool.
And what made you want to kind of look into programming? Was it in your life at all up until that point? Like, what drew you to, coming to that boot camp office hours and pursuing, technology versus very different from bread?
Yeah. I think it was mostly talking to some of my friends who are software engineers and finally realizing what software engineers do, which is building products with code. And I was like, wait, that's really cool. I want to do that too. I think coding is really fun. And as a software engineer, I'm able to build products that really make an impact. And that's why I wanted to do it.
So when we met at the Reactor, when you showed up to that boot camp office hours, at what stage of your kind of search/studying, I imagine you were like, oh my gosh, whiteboarding, what the heck is this? Where were you at that point in your, search? Because y'all, I'm not joking. I'm not flattering these ladies. I shared examples of the ways that they like their processes and ways that they, ended up applying for roles and their demos, which we'll get into the projects. Such great projects, y'all. But where were you at in your kind of point of searching at that point?
Yeah, I think when we met, it was pretty early on. I think one of the office hours I also went to with you was doing interview practice, and I had no idea what was going on. Someone was up there going over a question. It was really hard to follow. Yeah, very, very early beginning stages of learning all of the things.
And I think that's such an important point to make for anybody who's tuning in and thinking of making a career switch or coming into tech. Interviewing as an engineer is very different than any interview I've ever done before in my entire life. Whiteboarding is something where you need to learn how to interview, which was something I could not wrap my head around. I'd been auditioning my whole life, and every interview I had for a normal person job was like, here's my resume, I'm a nice person. So the concept of proving, and also hearing much more senior developers like my boyfriend and other friends say, yeah, like I have to take time off and study for interviews, even though I've been doing this for 10 plus years, was like, oh my gosh, this is so overwhelming. So I completely empathize with coming to a practice whiteboarding session and being like, I have to do what? Like, okay. So Kimberly, this is a great segue into how we met, which was also at the Microsoft Reactor. Shout out to the Reactor. And I believe we met at a Girl Geek dinner. Isn't that right?
That's right.
So where were you in your life? What were you doing? What brought you to that Girl Geek dinner at that point?
Yeah, I joke now that I used to draft press releases, but now I draft pull requests. I was working in communications, public relations. I was always told that I was better at words than at numbers or math or science. So I went to do a job that would mean I'd write a lot. And I got really, really lucky to get a job at a company called Stripe, which is a tech company here in San Francisco, building economic infrastructure for the internet. And I had so much fun working on that team. And I also had a lot of fun getting to know the engineers at Stripe and getting to take a class that they offered for anyone who wasn't working in an engineering role to learn the fundamentals of programming. And I had so much fun with it that I tried to pursue my computer science associate's degree on the side, but that didn't really work with a full-time job, especially at a fast-growing startup. So I took a huge leap and took some time off to learn to program. And that's how I found the Girl Geek Dinner event and met you there.
Oh my gosh. And y'all, the way that Kimberly introduced herself to me, I will never forget it. She was like, hi, I'm Kimberly. I feel like we should know each other because I made this Dolly Parton Instagram app. And I was like, tell me everything, which I have some props to share. First of all, I brought my squishy bread that I keep on my desk at all times as a stress relief. That makes me think of Sophia all the time when I use it. And also I have this cup that is a gift that I got for Kimberly at Target, but I've not seen her in a long time, that says Cup of Ambition, which is a Dolly Parton quote, incredible. Of course. Coming your way soon as we grab coffee together, Kimberly. But I remember with both of these instances that I was like, oh, these are people with really cool and interesting backgrounds who have a lot of talent and like really get it as far as like combining either their passions or previous life stuff into something really fun and a project that would be fun for other people to do as well. So I have a background question for both of you. What was your exposure to computer science in general, or even just computers before you decided to make this career change? Because, you know, I was in my late 20s when I decided to make the big leap to get into tech and do a boot camp. I had computers around me my whole life. I was good at computers, but an engineer was one of two things in my mind. As a kid, I would say it was like guys in lab coats with like a hammer, like literally putting a computer together. And I was like, beyond my skill set. As I worked in tech, you know, similar to Kimberly had worked in a tech company, I was like, okay, these dudes come in at like 11, they've got hoodies, they wear these big headphones, and they're like hacking the mainframe, and it's nothing that I understand or am interested in. So what was your exposure to computers growing up? I guess we can start with Sophia.
Yeah, for me, I took my first and only computer science class in college, and I absolutely hated it. I had no prior programming experience before that, so there was a huge learning curve, and I think most of the students in my class had already had a lot of programming experience, so I came into the class feeling very behind from the first day, and after that class, I never took another computer science class again.
Wow.
But still here.
And would you say you saw anybody who like looked or acted or sounded like you? Like, does it feel like an accessible kind of world to you at any point?
Yeah, not really. I was told that not many women do take computer science classes, and the class that I took probably was very male dominated.
Yeah. And Kimberly, I also wanted to share this thing in the chat. We've got jQuery going crazy in the chat here saying, Dolly Parton stan, yes, Kimberly. That was my response to jQuery. I was like, this girl gets it. This girl understands. Because for folks who aren't familiar with my work, I like to do a lot of really creative, silly projects. I should also kind of explain probably why Kimberly was like, I feel like you need to know about this project. I believe in this talk that I was talking about at Girl Geek Dinner, I was mentioning a couple really goofy projects I had been working on, like my fake boyfriend app was one of them. Mario Kart astrology with Azure Cognitive Services was something I was playing around with at the time. So it was sort of this like kismet moment of meeting Kimberly where I was like, Dolly Parton, tell me more. So Kimberly, same question. What was your kind of computer technical background before we met that one night at the reactor?
I had a very similar experience to Sophia. The only difference was I went to a women's college, so everyone in my computer science class was a woman. I felt that representation there, but very similarly, it was just so overwhelmed having not had any sort of exposure before and dropped any thought of pursuing computer science after that one class. So.
Right. And I think, you know, this is a big reason why I'm here is I had heard a talk as an executive assistant at Google all about getting young women, we're talking like girls who code, you know, K through 12 type stuff, interested in programming by adding, you know, people and characters and pop culture to Disney Channel, Nickelodeon shows. And I was like, gosh, where was this? When I was a kid, I would have loved to have, you know, heard about this. So really, sometimes it just takes someone in your life, be it, you know, with Kimberly, this program that was through the company she worked at, or Sophia, you know, knowing people in the industry. Sometimes it really just takes someone telling you, like, you can do this. Like, this is accessible. And I guess I also want to ask the question to y'all. Clearly, you had jobs and lives before getting in as a junior engineer at a tech company. What was that like, first of all, like being a second career developer, you know, trying to come into the world, you know, with your previous experience? And I feel like I know the answer to this, but do you use your skills from your previous role in your current jobs? Sophia? Do you find yourself making bread at Free Will? I would love to know.
So far, I have not made bread at Free Will, but in one of my prior jobs, I was an executive assistant to the CEO, and part of that looked like making the onboarding program for our new hires. And we are currently hiring more engineers at Free Will. And I've helped revamp our current onboarding process. And so I've been able to bring that experience to the job.
And I think that's so important too for, especially when it comes to folks who are newer to this industry. When you're hiring someone who's either a self-taught engineer or boot camp grad, whatever it may be, these aren't people who have never had a job before or like have never been in a meeting before. These are people who have had work experience, like it's not their first rodeo. So Kimberly, same question. What was your experience in that way? And also, I'm sure you use your writing skills. Also, I should mention, Kimberly is like one of my favorite bookworm friends, has such great book recommendations. But yeah, same question, Kimberly.
Oh, thanks, Chloe. I definitely do. I make the joke about press releases and pull requests, but those two things are actually more similar than I think people think in terms of explaining what additions that you're making to someone else's code base. I also got really good advice earlier this year that learning to read other people's code is way more important than writing code yourself as an early engineer. And I see this every single day. So having that background in reading and writing is super helpful.
Oh my gosh, that's such a great segue into the fun, amazing projects that both of these ladies paired on with me. Because I remember in both instances, I think it was the first time that both Kimberly and Sophia had ever worked with an API before, I think. So we were banging our head against a wall in so many instances with like different third-party APIs, documentation. Oh my goodness. As a new engineer, can I just say, good documentation for the win. Without good documentation, no one's going to know how to use your product. And I feel like that was a really big part of us learning together and building, different applications together was, struggling through that, understanding like how important it is to like describe in detail. And this goes for onboarding, and this also goes for, technical tools. Like, how do I use this product? Why do I use this product? Like even just missing a comma or a semicolon or a, hey, make sure you toggle, shout out to the Twitter API, make sure that you toggle this one thing on so things actually get tweeted when you tweet something out with their API are super important. And I would also just kind of, while I pull up your awesome projects and we share them here in a second, what would you say? So let's take a quick trip down memory lane to interviewing because I know we probably have a lot of people tuning in here who are like, tell me more about these super scary whiteboarding interviews. I should say in my boot camp, I was going through a boot camp, had a lot of imposter syndrome, was like, I don't belong here. I don't know what I'm doing. And once they said, oh, and also you need to go in front of, a Simon Cowell, Randy, Paula Abdul like panel and write out code and explain it to people without Googling it. I was like, are you serious? What do you mean? So what was interviewing like for you the first time that you did it and probably several times after? Either one of you can jump in.
I've had two really scary whiteboarding interviewing experiences, which were really rough and definitely required studying and very different, like you had said, Chloe, from anything I'd ever done before. But for the job I currently have, I got very lucky and really appreciated from the get-go that the company had a take-home style interview. And so I was able to write a draft blog post, which is what I do in my day-to-day job. And in the interview, I was able to have a real code review about the app that I built, that we wrote the blog post about. So I really encourage, not enough companies to have processes like that, but I encourage finding those and applying for those jobs for sure.
Oh my goodness, I could not agree more, Kimberly. Like I always share this with our Microsoft student ambassadors, anyone who's coming into this industry from a non-traditional background. Don't do your like Microsoft, Google, Amazon interviews first. Practice, like get some practice rounds in before you go for your dream job at Disney, whatever it may be, because you really have to learn how to interview in this industry, which is very confusing for a lot of folks, especially myself coming from I used to tap dance for people for jobs. So this was like a huge shock to me. I was like, you want me to do what? And such a big part of these whiteboarding interviews is not only solving the problem. In fact, I remember crying. I had like 4 or 5 rounds with Google for an engineering residency program. Cried after the first one, thought I bombed it. Ended up getting a second one, was like, no way I'm getting a third one. Got the third one. I didn't solve the algorithm in those first 3. They truly were going off how I was problem solving, how I was talking through, what I was going through. So Sophia, what was that like for you? Because I can't imagine anybody made you like, I don't know, what would be the equivalent of bread making for whiteboarding? Like watch you make the sourdough starter.
Yeah, I think that interviewing is always so nerve-wracking, especially whiteboarding interviews. But as you said, I think that interviewing is a skill. Practice definitely helps. And before I had my first real whiteboarding interview, I did a lot of practice rounds with my friends, and I think that was incredibly helpful. And I think now, in the past couple of weeks, I've been on the other side as the interviewer, and I can say that communication is really important. I was told that a lot of times you definitely have to share your thought process, your approach before you begin coding. And now being on the other side, I definitely agree. I think it's really helpful to hear candidates talk about their thought process and just have a conversation with the interviewer.
Absolutely. And I think, first of all, there's so many things I have to say here. First of all, when I was told, yeah, typically it's a 5-hour on-site. This is in the pre-Panera, pre-pandemic times. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? I'm going to like be there from like 9 a.m. to like lunch, post-lunch, and I'm going to have lunch there. And part of my interview is the lunch. Like, do they also want me to tap dance? Because I can also do that too. That is an exhausting interview process, especially for folks like us who have come from these kind of informational interviews where it's like, oh, you're a nice person and your resume seems to say you can do the things that you say you do. Like, here's the next round, right? I was just talking to some of our Microsoft student ambassadors, shout out to any of them tuning in right now, that some of the best advice that I got, that I'm sure I instilled onto these 2 ladies when we were working together, was if you do, and shout out to Mecca, who gave me this advice way back in the day, back in 2016, if you do 1 leet code or practice problem a day for a month, you will have pretty much seen like every structure and format of a whiteboarding question out there. So a lot of studying, and I really want to emphasize this, y'all, very, very senior developers, myself included, still study for interviews. This isn't just for your first role. This is part of the process. And engineering interviews are very broken. And I agree, Kimberly, I see so much positive change in the industry of, I think some of the best interviews that I had were walking through a project or an application that I had worked on and pairing on it together, which is so much more realistic to what you will actually do in the job. You as an interviewee get an assessment of, oh, I really like pairing with this person. And the interviewer actually gets to see like, because in what world are we ever working on a program and not looking at Stack Overflow? Like, never, at least not me. And I think also a big thing that we all talked about is telling your story. So like being able to go into a room and not just say like, hi, I'm Chloe, I used to be an actress. It's like, okay, great. Why are you here? What do you have to offer me? But being able to highlight and showcase like, hey, like an interview question that would say, tell me about a time that you led a team through blah, 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 being able to relate that in ways that speak to your story. A question I have for both of you, and Kimberly, if you want to start, so we all kind of have this like 30-second elevator pitch of ourselves, right? Where it's like, oh, I used to do this, now I do this, now I like working on this. Was that helpful to you as you interviewed to kind of like rehearse that? I know at my boot camp, Hackbright, the whole telling your story element of interviewing was a really big focus of our program. What was your story that you would tell people when you would go in for an interview?
That I say a lot what I said before. I used to draft press releases, now I draft pull requests. That's
Which is such
kind
a
of how
great
it started.
tagline. That should be like your LinkedIn headline.
That's the tagline. And then I get into how curious I was at Stripe about how things are actually built and how I spent some time learning on my own and then found community and got really lucky to find community. And what's the phrase? I'm not self-taught, but I'm community taught. I feel that so much because of events at the Reactor and because of places like Dev where people post all the things they're building all the time. So that was not a very tight-knit elevator pitch, but it
was good.
Let's do it.
I thought it was very succinct. What about you, Sophia?
Yeah, I usually share that I'm looking to work at a social impact driven company. That is the background that I come from. And when I do interview and look for companies, I do look for companies who are making a positive social impact. So I think that bridge from my past experience really helps with both finding companies to interview with and for companies to see how I will fit in at their company.
And I think that is one of the things that I just love to see, especially with non-traditional background folks. You know, I get a lot of folks who are not in tech who say like, tech is evil, especially here in San Francisco, especially coming from an arts background. And really what I love about having folks like the two of you come into this industry is bringing this wealth of knowledge and expertise from folks who have not been born into this industry. So being able to not only provide perspective from a non-traditional background, but also not everybody goes to a 4-year computer science degree. Not everybody is used to this industry. That's for sure. We've got some great comments in the chat here. So we have completely agree. It's a big problem because often it does not really represent what day-to-day work really is like. I couldn't agree more here. So in many places it's used for gatekeeping and that sucks. Yes, it totally sucks. And actually, and I'm sure Kimberly and Sophia will agree here, a lot of times I would pick up on things in the interview where I was like, ooh, I don't think I want to work here, which is a really tough thing to understand in your head where you're like, I need a job. Like, I need to get a job. But you're truly interviewing the company as much as they're interviewing you. I love that what you said, Sophia, about how you were really looking for a social impact driven company and be able to make change within tech. I want to talk about your amazing projects, and we'll get into that in the second half of the stream, y'all. I should also say, if you have any questions for these lovely ladies or myself, please put them in the chat or comments. We love to hear what you have to say. So drop them in the chat. We'll try to get to them. But Sophia, I'm going to call you out because you, first of all, I truly, truly mean in almost every talk that I give to our Microsoft student ambassadors, to folks that I mentor, I will cite projects or things or like ways that Kimberly and Sophia modeled their job search and their studying. And Sophia, you had this really incredible doc, I want to say, where you were tracking like how much how much you were interviewing or where you were interviewing, or what was that and how did you create that?
Yeah, thank you, Chloe. Yeah, the doc tracked a lot of the things that I did. The document basically served as a way for me to hold myself accountable and also served as a structure of all of the things that I needed to do because there's a lot that needs to get done. I took a lot of courses, I did a lot of practice interviews, I wrote a lot of blogs. Thank you for teaching me how to do all of that stuff. And I used that document to kind of serve as my syllabus on how to learn how to code on my own.
Remind me, did you open source that? I feel like I've seen you share it before, right?
Yes, it can be accessed via a GitHub link.
If you want to drop that in the private chat, we can share it in the chat and we'll put it up on the screen as well. And then Kimberly, I remember when we first started out and we were like going through like, okay, how are we going to tackle this? We had a conversation, which is a conversation I have with literally every person that I've mentored of, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed. So many people are telling me different things, which was the same case for me when I got out of my boot camp. Some people would say, apply to open source. Other people would say, only apply to very specific jobs. Some people would say, apply to every job. Some people would say, forget about open source, make a bunch of projects and have a portfolio. And other people would say, make an about me page. And it's just so, everybody has an opinion. Everybody is throwing a fire hose of information at you of how you should tackle the job search, how you should be, presenting yourself as an individual job searching. What was that like for you as someone, new to this space, and also just like, I saw so much of myself in you during this process where I was just like, yes, it is just like so many things that you can and should do. And how did you choose what to do?
It really helped to have you there for sure, and having that empathy. So thank you again for all of that. For me, it's so overwhelming. My strategy was really to look at my network and see who I knew already working at places that were hiring junior engineers. And I say that from a place of luck and privilege because I worked at a tech company before. So if I wasn't in that situation, I do think that attending any meetups that you can and participating in any online forums that you can is really, really helpful. That's how I met you and how I met a lot of really wonderful people. And Sophia too, I share that OKR list that you have posted in the chat all the time with everyone. So the more people you can meet on this journey, the better.
And that's such a good point about community too. And obviously things are very different now. We're all very much online. But do either of you have suggestions for ways to either, tap into community or get involved with, be it, a group or open source projects or anything like that? I hate the word networking. Personally, it makes me very uncomfortable. I like to think of it as friend making. How did you kind of get over that kind of social awkwardness, Kimberly, of like, oh gosh, like, I don't know these people. Like, I know for me, my first day of my boot camp, I had to Google what STEM was. I was like, is this a tree botany thing? Like, what is everybody talking about? How did you find these groups?
I think the most important thing is to build things that you actually enjoy and are working on and are excited about. So I really love Dolly Parton, and I was excited to talk about this Instagram clone because I could also talk about Dolly, and the same thing applied to the Lizzo app and the Mean Girls app, and anything that you build that you're excited about, that'll come through and will help you meet people who are interested in the same things. And today in my job, that's still happening. Daily is built on a communications protocol called WebRTC, and just because I've been looking at dev for different WebRTC tagged posts or Twitter for different WebRTC tagged posts, I'm meeting people who are writing books on the topic, and I'm getting sneak peeks of the books, and it's really fun. So I'd say those would be my two things. Work on things that you're excited about, and you'll find the people who are excited to hear them.
Yeah. And Sophia, I feel like it's so funny because I miss in-person events, y'all. I kind of love that I can finish this stream and then I can like put on PJ pants and just like, hang out on my couch. But I do miss hanging out with people in person. And I remember during our boot camp office hours that Sophia attended, that oftentimes the conversations that were most valuable or that I would get feedback on weren't so much the whiteboarding, weren't so much the resume workshop things, but were more talking to other people who were in similar situations and being able to have a forum to be like, oh, this happened to you too. Because I remember a huge eye-opening thing to me with my boot camp was once I started talking to the other girls in my program about like, is anybody else like really overwhelmed by these whiteboarding interviews? And like, we were able to talk to each other and share like, oh, I got this question and it was really interesting. And here's how I solved it and XYZ. So Sophia, what was that kind of experience for you community wise? I imagine there aren't a lot of, well, maybe there are, you can inform me. Are there a lot of baker meetups? Like, I don't know. How did you kind of find what groups to get involved with?
Yeah, there are no baker meetups that I know of, but I do agree with what Kimberly said about working on things that you're really passionate about and finding people who are also passionate about the same things. That is how we met and made our bread project together. And there's also another program that I did. It's called Chingu.io, and I've sent it in the chat.
Yes, share that.
Yeah, I met a couple of other developers through there, and we worked on a project together and made a little clone of a Chrome app called Momentum. And I also did a lot of practice interviews with the people on my team. So I think that's a great way to meet people who are also from the same background and trying to achieve the same goals as you are. And there's another program that I've heard of that is really great. I haven't done it myself, but I've had a lot of friends tell me they've met a lot of great people and learned a lot through there. It's called the Collab Lab, and I've also sent it in the chat.
Okay, I love that name, the Collab Lab, and I'm upset that I didn't come up with that. Love a good pun. And speaking of puns, we're going to go over these projects. I know I keep teasing the projects, but I have one more thing to bring up because Kimberly made a really excellent point. I personally recognized when I started my job search that I very much came from a place of privilege because I was one of the few people in my boot camp and in my life really that had someone at home, my boyfriend, shout out to Ty Smith, who helped me through this process and mentored me. I had a resource at home that I could go to and be like, I had this interview. Is this weird? Is this normal? Like, can you check? Am I crazy here? And that was so useful, not only just for like code reviews, which again, shout out to Ty, had not seen Python or JavaScript in a hot minute, but was able to help me a little bit with my coding challenges for homework and whatnot. I'm like, what is this? Why would I need a function? Why would I do this? Flask, why? Am I drinking? I don't know. But I also recognize that there are so many barrier to entries / just like unspoken unknowns when it comes to A, interviewing, B, red flags like, ooh, I don't want to work at this company. This is a really bad sign. And I'm assuming the answer is yes here, but like there really is a lot of value in finding a mentor, finding someone that you can ask these questions and feel comfortable asking these questions, especially when it comes to negotiating and especially when it comes to compensation. So yeah, I would love to know, through your process, did you run into any of those, like, for lack of better term, what the heck moments where you're like, this is very different than baker life, or this is very different from my writing job? Either one of you, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, I met a lot of great mentors through in-person events that I attended back when those were a thing. And a lot of them, you included, Chloe, have helped me with negotiation, interview practice, and just getting feedback on projects, which I think is incredibly helpful. And I think in addition to mentors, I think it's also, as we were talking about community before, to also have peers who are doing the same thing as you and maybe interviewing and asking them like, hey, I'm having this interview experience, which is kind of weird to me. Like, has that been happening to you? And hearing and just seeing what other people are going through in that same process, I think is incredibly helpful.
And I've actually been meaning to tell Kimberly this, but she recommended this amazing author. Is it pronounced Brene Brown?
Yes.
Yeah, Brene Brown has this amazing audiobook that I recommend to everyone, like even very senior devs, called I Thought It Was Just Me. I think that's the title of it, which is all about shame in women specifically, but I think it applies to all genders, and gender is a social construct, where it talks about how we internalize and feel a lot of shame for not knowing things, for feeling like, I thought, literally the title of the book, I thought it was just me. Did you have any of those moments, Kimberly, where you were just like, oh my gosh, like this isn't going to happen. Like, clearly I'm an idiot. Like, why?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I called you after my first whiteboarding interview and was so stressed out about how it went and was convinced that I wouldn't get the job and would never get any job. And then I wound up getting that job in the end, and having you there to validate that it wasn't just me, that these things are hard, was incredibly helpful.
I think I remember vividly because this is my number one story that I tell to people, because truly, I'm not joking when I say the highs are very high and the lows are very low, especially when you're interviewing for your first developer job, be it with a computer science degree, be it self-taught, be it through a boot camp. And I always tell this story that I remember breaking down crying in a Whole Foods and people were staring at me because I got a rejection letter from the LinkedIn apprenticeship program. And I thought, oh my God, this is it. They don't do whiteboarding. I'm in. All I got to do is like write this essay. This is my chance. And when I got my rejection, and I had been applying to hundreds, if not thousands, no, probably hundreds of companies, but that broke me. It was really the straw that broke the camel's back. And I was like, well, if I can't get into this, how am I going to get into engineering or programming at all? And imposter syndrome is a word I had never heard of before I started in tech. It was something that was talked about quite a bit in my boot camp. Shout out to Hackbright. But imposter syndrome, I would love to hear your thoughts on imposter syndrome and if you experienced any of that during your job search? And if not, how did you do it? Sophia, do you want to start?
Sure, yeah. Imposter syndrome all the time, especially as someone who, yeah, kind of did this through, I like the phrase, community taught. I think it's, yeah, oftentimes I'm alone interviewing some more and just getting a lot of rejections always leaves me thinking, yeah, do I belong here? And it's, yeah, hard. It's a hard thing, and I think it'll always be there.
What about you, Kimberly? I know Kimberly and I had a lot of very long talks over matcha, just like going, it's going to be okay. I've so been there. Oh, I should also say a happy ending to my Whole Foods story. I totally did not finish my story. I broke down crying in Whole Foods, and I was like, this isn't going to happen. And literally a week later, I got 2 job offers. So like when I say the highs are high and the lows are low, truly this is such a industry and method of interviewing that really test your patience. And even, I always joke around that like self-taught boot camp folks really, you don't just wake up one day and decide I'm going to quit my job and drop X amount of money on a boot camp and go pursue this thing full time. Tell us a little bit about your imposter syndrome, Kimberly.
It's something that I work on reframing a little bit when I notice those types of thoughts. The truth is, it's not that I'm necessarily an imposter, it's that I'm unpracticed or that I haven't spent a lot of time yet on this particular thing. So that's the tool I'm trying to use now when I notice it happening, because of course it's there.
Absolutely. Yes, we have people in the chat here. jQuery says, honestly, the one place it's safe to cry is at Whole Foods. Yes, safe space, especially now with masks. A lot easier to hide your tears. All those people were like, why is this lady like crying about avocados? What's wrong with her? Imposter syndrome. Cloud Ember says imposter syndrome I had to deal with a lot more when I started working. Oh my gosh, very much this. Before we get into your projects, and don't mind me, I'm just tweeting that we're still live so we can get some more folks joining us in here. Tell me a little bit about like onboarding in your first job. First of all, what was it like to get that job offer and accept that job offer and sign that contract, which I imagine was a lot more money than you were making before? Because I don't want to disregard the fact that tech salaries are life-changing amounts of money for a lot of folks, especially for someone like me who is an actress living in the Bay Area and working in admin roles. What was that like to get your offer? And then what was it like onboarding as a junior engineer? Was it anything like you expected? Sophia, do you want to start?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, signing that contract was a great feeling. Yeah, it was like all the hard work all paying off. And in terms of onboarding, yeah, they sent me my laptop on my first day. I got my developer environment all set up. Thankfully, there was a lot of documentation guiding me through that. And then I spent the first couple of weeks doing one-on-ones and getting to know all the different people on the product engineering team and working on a couple of small tickets just to get to know the code base. And I think one thing that was incredibly helpful that my manager did was host daily optional office hours for me to just drop by and ask any questions. And I definitely took advantage of that and went to almost all of them and asked her all of the questions that I had.
I love just like safe spaces to ask questions, which really was the purpose originally of that bootcamp office hours, was like, hey, not everybody comes into this industry knowing how to do this or what to do. What about you, Kimberly? What was that like to, sign that first offer, have your first week, probably a bit of a whirlwind?
It was definitely a whirlwind. It was great though. Similar to Sophia, Daily had really great documentation for getting my development environment up and running. So that was very fast. And my team, the other DevRel engineers on the team were out the week that I joined, but they were so thoughtful about leaving a concrete list of things that I could do and work on that first week. And that really helped me, like the ticket Sophia was talking about, just get to know the code base and the things that I would be writing about a little bit more.
Yeah. And I really want to emphasize, when you come into this industry, it is, first of all, when you're interviewing, you want one of the number one questions you should ask as someone interviewing at a company, especially as a junior engineer, and especially as someone from a non-traditional background, is have you mentored someone before? Like, have you had someone new come into this company? Because oftentimes, very common here in the Bay Area, or really anywhere else, there will be 3 to 4 person startups. And in theory, they will want to have a junior engineer to mentor. But typically, there's not a lot of like onboarding, or like people expect that they're going to have the bandwidth to be able to help and support, but they don't. So time after time, I've seen a lot of folks take the first job that they get offered, and then 2 months later, they'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm in this toxic situation. I'm getting no help. And they have to do the job search all over again. And it's a nightmare. None of us like to interview as an engineer. At least I don't. If you do, cool. And tell me what you're doing to do that. But I thought, y'all, we could get in to your projects because I've been teasing them on Twitter all day because I am so obsessed with them. I'm going to share my screen here real quick. And the first one that I have up is trying to make fetch happen, LOL JK, a post request happen, which is a Mean Girls app that was inspired by Mean Girls Day, which, oh my gosh, what day is Mean Girls Day, Kimberly? October 3rd, right? Can you explain the origin of this app and why we made it and what we did with it? And I'll just be scrolling through to show all our lovely visuals here.
Yeah, so the October 3rd is kind of an internet holiday because of the scene in the movie where Katie asks, what day is it? And I think it's
Here's
Aaron says it's
the
October
zoom
3rd.
in on this image of Lindsay Lohan, and I don't remember this actor's name, but he's lovely, and he was on RuPaul's Drag Race recently as a judge.
Oh.
But she asked for a date, and it was October 3rd, and it's a big deal to Caddy in the movie.
Yeah, so it's an internet holiday, and we had met recently. I think maybe in September was when we had met. And so I thought it would be fun if for this holiday, we built this app using Twilio and Azure Functions to basically respond and tell us what day is what, since we didn't have Aaron Samuel sitting there with us. And it was really fun.
Very true. I'm just going to drop in a chat. Oh, we have a comment from jQuery. Very fast. Could not agree more. I'm going to put up on the screen here a link to this. We have a cute little banner here. You can go to aka.ms/wwmeangirls and check out this post for yourself. But yeah, okay, tell us more. What did this app do? I mean, I know this, but I want all the people at home to know.
Yes, so this app used Azure Functions to hooked up to a Twilio phone number to respond with the date of October 3rd. There's not too much to this app, but it was a great way to get started working with Azure and serverless functions and Twilio, because kind of like those third-party APIs that you mentioned earlier.
Okay, and also we just need to say shout out to Twilio for both of these apps we're talking about today. The best documentation in the West as far as I'm concerned. If you've not checked out their documentation, it's gamified, it's fun, it's interactive, and such a great like first API, I feel like, to play with for one of your first projects. So shout out to Twilio. Okay, yeah, so we've got you can check this out if you want to go through and build. I mean, it doesn't even have to be a Mean Girls October 3rd app. I'm like, it's almost Halloween. Maybe it's a Halloween countdown app, whatever it may be. But what did you learn from creating this Mean Girls app? And like, how did you talk about it in your interviews when you were showcasing this as a project?
I talked about kind of like you said, how good it was to be able to, I learned a lot about documentation just from building this because we were looking at Twilio and Microsoft's documentation as we went through building it. So I talked about that, and I talked about getting familiar with serverless functions and serverless and what does that even mean. And it was really fun. I talked about how much fun it was mostly, and also how it's really how I like to learn by putting in things like Mean Girls that just make things fun.
And I should also say, Kimberly, is it okay if I share your About Me website? Is that cool?
I'm going to be redoing it. I'm actually very embarrassed of the state that it's in, but if you think it's okay to share, it's totally fine.
I'm going to share it if that's cool, because see, it already populates in my thing here because I use Kimberly's About Me page as an example for a lot of students that I, say this is how you should think about structuring this. But something that I loved about, Kimberly's site that she's updating, no judgment, she's changing the UI, okay? is that she had all of these great examples on here of like, you're a human person. You know what I mean? You're not just some random person on the internet applying for this job. You had your Dolly Parton app on here. You had a bunch of examples of like all the things and apps that you built. Also these really cool, talk about social impact, COVID-19 open restaurant finder. We've got all this stuff in here, Ride for Life, Mean Girls Daybot, of course, your Dolly Parton app, which we'll have to share out with the folks very soon, which was basically Instagram for Dolly Parton. Such a big fan of it. Ooh, we've got a comment here that says, cool app. I agree, Cyrixby. Like, such a, like, if I was interviewing someone and they're like, I made this Mean Girls app, I'd be like, hired. And this is a great segue into Sophia's app, because I believe what came first? It was Mean Girls app, and then Sophia, I feel like we modeled a lot of what we did with the Bread app around the format that Kimberly and I worked on the Mean Girls app. Is that right?
Yes, it is really similar. We used Twilio and Azure Functions for this as well. And yeah, we were looking through Kimberly's blog to see how to set up the Twilio and Azure integrations. That documentation was excellent.
Also, remember this part of the pandemic where everybody was like so after sourdough starters, at least in the Bay Area. I saw this on Reddit so much. This truly, we were ahead of our time, honestly, Sophia. Like, I can't believe. And what was really cool about this project too, and also I want to mention, this is actually my desk setup, and I do keep these squishy breads as her wrist guard and just a general stress reliever here. But was this, like, when you were talking about this in your interviews, like, how did you kind of speak to this project? Like, was it a really good way to kind of incorporate that previous life into your story? How did you usually frame this when you talked about it?
Yeah, I think this is an excellent project for catching people's eye, because a lot of the times projects will look really similar when we see them on resumes, but since this is a pretty unique project about bread, that usually catches people's eye, and that really helps open that conversation and getting into the door.
Oh my gosh, I totally forgot that we included this amazing video of the bread being made. And also something I forgot about this project is, didn't you name your sourdough starter Martha? Is that why the contact is Martha?
Yes.
That's so great. I love that so much. And again, y'all, if you have any comments or questions, put them in the chat. Ooh, this is a great question. Two great questions, actually. First, is this something you built over a weekend or more of a longer term project? This is such a great question, because I feel like, let me bring up this visual, which I'm sure I showed both Kimberly and Sophia. Iceberg of success, because I feel like oftentimes when we see, so this was in the bathroom of the boot camp that I attended. Let me open this up in a full screen here so we can really zoom in, of what people see versus what actually goes on behind the scenes, right? So success is an iceberg. Literally, this is in the bathroom, and I saw it every day at Hackbright, and I was like, I'm at the bottom of, I'm this little sad heart down here. But I think oftentimes what people see is, oh my gosh, like, these projects must be done so quickly and easily and come so easily to folks. This is not the case. We worked, I want to say we worked multiple weeks on this, right, y'all? Both of these projects. How would you, either of you can chime in. Is this something that we built over a weekend?
I think for Mean Girls Day, we wanted to get it done for Mean Girls Day. And so I think there was like October 2nd, I think we built this the day before. Right.
We were like in crunch mode, because we were like, this is going to go viral. We got to get this out in time for Mean Girls Day. So actually we did kind of go into crunch mode for it, which was a good deadline for us to follow. But I would say we were definitely in this zone over here of failure, persistence, dedication, because it was not an easy task. Like, we ran into a lot of error messages. Like, so it was something that we whipped up, but it was also a project that I had worked on before. So I had experience working with Azure Functions. Yeah. Sophia, remind me, did we spent probably a week or two on it, right?
Yeah, I think we did spend a week or two on it, and I remember us running into a couple of bugs. One really funny one being that we just forgot to npm install Twilio, and we just couldn't run anything because we didn't install it. So yeah, we definitely went through a couple bugs. Took us a week or two.
And I think that's such a great point that ties back to what we were saying earlier about good documentation. Is I remember after we ran into that issue where we're like, oh my gosh, this is so stupid. Like we forgot to install Twilio. That I'm pretty sure we put in bold somewhere here, like, do not forget, we forgot. Don't make the mistake that we did. Definitely check out, if you go to aka.ms/wwbread, you can go through this this work of labor and love that we created together here. But yeah, we also have this great comment/question here of imposter syndrome, ? Which, again, I had never heard of before my boot camp, but I'll give my little definition of imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is the concept/idea that's I would say pretty prevalent in tech, 'cause it's the first time I've ever learned of it, of feeling like you're a complete phony, failure, and fake, you don't belong, and you have no idea what you're doing. And I can tell you, as someone who's been working in professionally in the industry since 2017, I never feel like I know what I'm doing. I am a senior cloud advocate at Microsoft, and I talk to people much more senior than me who've been at Microsoft 20 plus years, and you never quite feel comfortable. Would you say, y'all, that you still experience imposter syndrome? And how did imposter syndrome kind of come up in your job searches? Do you want to start, Sophia?
Yeah, I still experience imposter syndrome on those days where my code just is not working. Yeah, and I really like what Kimberly said earlier about, shifting the mindset on we're still learning.
And I think this is also something, Samir, who asked us this question about imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome truly is something always in the back of my mind and never quite goes away. I think that talking to other people is super, super important when it comes to getting over imposter syndrome. But I also think, once you start to understand that engineering, specifically coding, be it if you're doing Power Apps, if you're doing, M365 stuff, if you're actually programming, it's a field unlike any other where you're constantly learning. Like, it's not like you go to school, you get your 4-year degree, and you don't have to read anything. Technology is growing at a rapid, constant rate. And if you don't keep up and you don't continue to study and you don't brush up on, X, Y, new language, you're going to be left behind. Kimberly, imposter syndrome, thoughts?
That's a lot of what I think about. Is part of why I want to transition to engineering, is because in a lot of ways I can apply what I learn immediately and see results literally in my web browser. And I love that. That means I will be constantly learning. I will have many thoughts every day about how I might not be smart enough or capable enough to do something, but it's all about recognizing those moments and recognizing it's just part of learning and part of this field and this industry.
Absolutely. I want to make sure that we get some plugs in here at the end, but my final question, final question that I have, what is your number one piece of advice? Maybe there's someone out there, they're thinking, I don't know, am I going to be able to do this? Is this for me? Should I make a career change into tech? What's your best piece of advice, or number one kind of tip that you would give to someone who's considering a job change? Sophia, do you want to start?
Sure, yes. I would say set a goal, find other people who also have similar goals, and talk to them often, work with them often, and also find people who can also support you in that.
Amazing. What about you, Kimberly?
If someone's considering changing careers, I would ask, does this spark joy when you're practicing or trying to test out a new field? Because it is an investment and it will be a lot of time changing and leaving behind a former career. So just making sure that you really are excited about the change you're making before you make it. And there are a lot of free resources to help you do that.
Couldn't agree more. Y'all, this has been such a pleasure. I've been wanting to catch up with these ladies for so long, and I'm so happy to hear how amazing and thriving they are in this industry. We're going to be sharing a bunch of links and details. I know that Sophia's company is hiring. I know that Kimberly has a bunch of resources to share, and we will put that in the show notes post-show. Thank you both so much for coming and talking to me today. I couldn't be prouder. I'm so glad the Reactor brought us all together. Shout out to the Reactor. I can't wait to see the amazing things that you continue to build in the industry. So thank you so much for coming on Web Wednesdays today.
Thank you, Chloe.
Thanks for having us, Chloe.
Of course. And y'all, I am not back next week. I believe Christopher is back. But definitely stay tuned for future things coming up on this channel. And also make sure to follow Kimberly and Sophia and myself on Twitter. Come and ask us questions. Continue the conversation there. Bye, y'all.